So many people predicted that the massive liquidity injections we've seen from the central banks over the past several years would drive an inflationary spiral.
Yep.
But so far, nothing. Why is that?
It is truly remarkable. $7 trillion is the number by which central bank balance sheets around the world have grown since the great financial crisis. Incredible liquidity injections, but as you say, where's the inflation that everyone expected? One of the answers is that money has been trapped essentially in the institutions. It's been trapped in the banks. It's been trapped in corporations that are using it in ways which are not providing new jobs. And so the velocity of money, what we call M2, has really slowed to a crawl, and all the money's just sitting there doing nothing.
Well, why is that?
Well, I think there are three major reasons. One of which you don't hear talked about very often in the investment world is technology. The technology changes that we're seeing, what I sometimes call the radically efficient society into which we're moving, is inherently less inflationary and more deflationary than an old industrial society. But you also have, of course, the debt itself. Global debt now exceeds $100 trillion, and government debts have increased 80% since 2007. And then finally, in a lot of the developed world, you've got really terrible demographics. You know, Japan's demographics are just awful. Europe's are barely any better. And all of these forces are deflationary by nature.
So there are inflationary forces in play, but also deflationary forces at the same time.
Yes.
How can they coexist that way?
My favorite analogy is it's like tectonic plates in the earth that are just pressing like this. They're both incredibly powerful, but they're sort of deadlocked right now, so you're not seeing either one of them move. The problem is, just like tectonic plates, if one of them does slip over, you could have a very rapid change in either inflationary pressures or deflationary pressures could overwhelm the other one.
So we're used to thinking about inflation, but deflation is kind of a new topic.
Yeah.
What are the key points for investors to consider?
It's a very new topic, and it really is something that people need to grasp. So one of the things that you're going to say is that deflation is very bad for the stock market. Mild inflation, that's kind of good for the stock market. Deflation, that's really bad for the stock market. But it also is going to hurt, so people say, oh, I want to be in bonds, but only specific kinds of bonds, because high yield bonds with risky corporate credits, not going to do well in a deflationary environment. What is going to do well is long dated, very secure government type bonds, U.S. Treasuries, in a deflationary environment. It's a very different set of dynamics, really requires people to do their homework and think about how they want to construct their portfolio.
All right, so faced with these twin threats of inflation and deflation, what is an investor to do?
Well, it's a very tricky and very historically unusual situation. One of the things that you can do, however, is to invest in real assets that are also throwing off current income. And the reason for that is that income component will protect you in a deflationary environment, but the real asset itself ought to increase in value in an inflationary environment. So timber and farmland, are two, particularly good examples. And there are funds that do focus on these kinds of investments that are available to investors if you can't go into the asset directly. And then the classic one really right now is Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, TIPS, which work inflation as they are advertised to do, but because the amount of the principal never just below par, they also work very well in a deflationary environment. And some institutional investors even call them real assets, even though they're clearly not, simply because they do behave like some income-producing real assets in either an inflationary or deflationary environment.